Hello and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm Flynn and I'm here with Jeremy Lord. It's nice to see you guys. How you doing, Jeremy?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me back. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, hey everyone in the chat. Have Ewan from Singapore, Emily from Brisbane. Jump into the chat room, say hello, let us know where you're from. We'd like to say hello. So we're actually kind of winding down our very first creative challenge.
Yeah, that's right. So we've done a series of 4. This is our 4th one today, at least with me.
Yep.
And yeah, so we're going to do a bit of a recap of kind of what we looked at over the last 3 weeks. And then we might do a little bit of kind of portfolio talk and sort of prepping for an illustration career. So if you guys have any questions, absolutely, that's what we're here for today. If you guys are just tuning in now, then kind of just a quick run through of what we did.
Yeah, we'll do a recap.
Yep.
Sounds good. Oh, and also, so you can log into the chat and say hello to us and everybody else by using your Adobe ID. So that's just your Adobe Cloud credentials. Log in, say hello. Georgina from Brisbane, nice to see you again. Nice to see a friendly face.
Yeah.
Well, friendly name.
Friendly icon.
Friendly icon, yeah.
Yeah. Should we just jump straight in?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. Okay, so we've got a bunch of things that we kind of covered. The 3 episodes that we covered over the last 3 weeks were all one sort of string of episodes to achieve the same goal. So if you guys missed them, they're in YouTube. If you guys go to the Adobe Asia Pacific channel, you'll see number 1, number 2, and number 3 of 4, and we're currently doing number 4.
This is us. This is it.
This is live. So just to recap really quickly, what we kind of went through, actually I'll show you guys in Photoshop because that's what we kind of focused on. We went through this idea of like how to take a sketch that's been done analog, as in not in a computer.
Yep.
With no intention of taking it into a computer, then change your mind halfway through and just go like, hey, you know what, actually this would be really cool in a computer, so now what?
So this might be something that you've done while you're sitting watching the latest episode of Game of Thrones and you're just drawing some dragons. And then you're like, actually this would make a really cool digital bit of work. And take a photo on my phone or scan it in or however you do.
Just photo on your phone, scan it in, like just get it into your computer somehow. Scanning is always going to be a better option just because you'll have uniform lighting throughout. But even if you do take it on your phone, like Photoshop will allow you to make it look nice and schmick. Which we want to get it to a phase where it's basically kind of looking like this, where we got a drawing that's black and then more importantly the page that's white. That's going to be crucial for the following stages. And then we can start to put some colors underneath that. So we want to put that layer on a multiply blending mode on top and then paint our colors underneath. And it takes us all the way into kind of like a relatively finished product, which is this. So we've gone from something that was just intended as a sketch in a page, in a sketchbook, sorry. And then we're taking that digitally and then made it into a layered artwork that can be manipulated, animated, whatever we want. Here's another kind of example of how that all works is this piece here. Basically, we've got a whole bunch of layers. The original sketch is right there, so you guys can see if I zoom in. I've fixed it up a little bit in Photoshop. But the basic framework of that sketch is still there with, warts and all.
Right.
And then it's just had color applied to it behind it. So that's kind of what we went through over the last 3 episodes. Whether or not you leave the original sketch in there to be seen afterwards is kind of up to you. I guess it really depends on the result that you're after. So here's a few other examples that we can look at. So that's just a page in the sketchbook, and here's the actual page to prove it. And look at that, the other drawing is right next to it.
Right.
Just happened randomly.
And this is like in some notebook?
This is just a moleskin sketchbook that I carry around with me. So that's gone from this to then actual digital line work. So the actual original sketch here is no longer present whatsoever.
Right.
And then that can go into sort of different variants. That's just the way that I like to work, but keeping the sketch in there is absolutely a possibility. But yeah, that was the kind of the basics of the last 3 weeks.
I love the background turning into typography there. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
It all just kind of like, again, as we'll see, like big fan of the sort of the Japanese style, trying to find typefaces that allow me to work in certain ways is, a bit of a graphic design background as well.
How do you deal with type that's like you can't read? Because I don't think you can read Japanese writing, can you?
No, not all of it, but there's like, 50,000 characters. I can read the basics.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of Google searching, a lot of translations, trying to make sure that's the right context. And trying to sort of not look like an idiot where he's like, that actually says something else.
That old classic tattoo
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of that, but it's part and parcel of the work, trying to sort of figure out what it says and getting nuances. It helps if you've got a few mates who can speak Japanese as well.
Oh, that helps. Yeah, unless, they're going to make fun of you and give you the wrong answer.
Give you the wrong direction.
Yeah. Hey, Wei Sim in the chat and Pratnya, sorry, I hope I got your name correct. So while you're in the chat room, actually, we're going to be, I think what we thought we might talk about is answer some of the questions that we got throughout that campaign, the Creative Challenge, but also from your previous live streams, and maybe condense them into like a little bit of a help for those that want to become a freelance illustrator.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is there's often some very common questions that are answered, so we'll try and answer some of those today.
Yeah.
And we've got some extra illustration content coming at 2 p.m, so stay tuned for that. But also in the chat room, if you have specific questions, you can ask while we're here as well. But why don't we get things started?
Yeah, let's do that.
So what are like some of the kind of common questions that you would normally get about starting out to become a freelancer full time? Or a big chunk of what you're doing, I
suppose most of them would be related around definitely like how to build a portfolio.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that I can do? How many pieces is a pretty frequent kind of question. Do I put in this piece? Do I put in that piece? How do I do the thing that I want to do, really?
Right.
But then it can get a little bit more sort of specific questions of like, how do I promote myself? How do I find my style is often an interesting question, because that's just like, cool, have you got 5 hours and we can chat about style?
Right. We've got 25 minutes.
So we'll attempt to do it in that. But I think those are the sort of the main questions in terms of like, how do I build my portfolio? What are the do's and don'ts? And then how do I get myself out there, essentially?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's break that down. Where did you start? Do you want to do that first?
Yeah, so I kind of started as a graphic designer, and I'll show you guys in the spirit of, I guess, like embarrassing myself. I think it's always cool to see where people started out.
Yeah.
I think that can give a lot of kind of context as to like, all right, so this person was in my position and they got there. It's like, it's good to see, like, you guys are seeing the finished piece. It's good to see where the thing started as well, I think.
Right.
So this is the portfolio that I had when I graduated in 2005.
It's in Paris, in France?
Yes, in Paris. So I did a year of animation and then 5 years of graphic design. So I've got a little bit of a graphic design background, as I said, which has definitely influenced my illustration work. But here's, this was the cover page. So this is my, like, I guess I want to say logo, but it's like, it's not, because it's not a logo, and there's like 3 different things on this page, and it's weird, and there's the GTA font, and it's like, whoa, what's going on?
Oh, that is so GTA. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Which I've edited, and it's like, but so there's a lot of kind of stuff that's happening weird here, and then I tried to sort of line it up in a way that was going to be sort of themed. So I had sort of animation, illustration, graphic design. Those were my 3 sort of big categories.
Which is pretty typical for people studying like some sort of communication course around the world, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like you try a couple of different things, you're not really sure what direction you're going to go in, but then you graduate with this like portfolio. It's like, hey, I can do packaging and check out this web design.
It's kind of like a mezza platter of like design stuff.
A la carte.
Like, yeah, totally. And I think that's totally fine. A lot of my students will ask me that as well, of just, should I just have photography in there, and and I think when you're just graduating from college, I think that's unrealistic. To assume that you will have a whole portfolio's worth of one kind of work.
Yeah.
It's possible, but it's really hard, I think. And because you're given different briefs, you're given a little bit of web design, a little bit of type, a little bit of this, a bit of this. So that's what your portfolio is going to be. And that's okay. I don't think anybody should have an expectation of like a post-grad student fresh out of college. It's like, you've mastered this already. That can happen, but it's pretty rare, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a kind of mishmash of different things. And what I'll do is I'll like take you guys through this, and then we'll go through some common mistakes, which a lot of them I made, so I can kind of talk from experience on this.
Okay.
But yeah, so this is just like an animation board. This is what we call an expression sheet in classical animation, which was super fun to do. But again, there's not a lot of context to this, other than sort of showing that like I can draw to some level. This doesn't say very much for a lot of people.
Right.
It's very specific to one thing, which is something that we'll come back on, I think, a little bit later on. Then we've got just sort of random 3D type again, like looks cool, but it's like, what's the context here? Why? What's the brief? Why are we doing this? Then I worked on, in my final year of college, I worked on a 3D animation with a couple of guys. So we did some concept art, we did some animation, some 3D, which was on 3ds Max, which like I definitely don't recommend to anybody who wants to hold on to their sanity. So just again, like random bits of animation. That's not mine. I don't know what that's doing in there. And then bits of illustration again. So just like a random drawing. And so like there's some mistakes here, not necessarily in the drawing, but like, why are you showing me this?
Right.
Is the big question.
I guess the purpose of a portfolio, we're assuming in this case, is to get a job or get work. Like that's what we're trying to like get to. So it's like, great, this is really nice and something to show as your achievements as a student. However, there's a bit of a mismatch compared to being a good student and doing briefs correctly. And then, okay, why would I hire you?
Yeah. Well, I think as like in the creative industry, no matter what it is that you're doing, there's two parts to it, right? There's skill, and then there's ideas, I guess, if you want to sort of generalize it in a really, really broad sense.
Yeah, I'm happy to generalize right now. I've only got 25 minutes. We'll go broad.
So I think like past a certain point, everybody's got a certain set of skills, and even if you don't, like, you know what, like, let's say that you're a genius, but you've never touched Photoshop before. Right. Like, I can teach you that in like 10 minutes. Right. Like, for what you need for this job, I can teach you in 10 minutes. If you're a whiz on Photoshop, but you have zero idea of what a concept is, that's a lot harder to teach. Right. So I think in those instances, it's like, show us the work and your skills, but also show us how you think and what the brief is, which is what this isn't doing essentially. So these are all just kind of random bits of illustrations, which I'll kind of zip through a little bit through sort of varying levels. And again, like so something like this is a perfect example, right? Like somebody might look at this and just go like, oh wow, well, you're an amazing drawer. But consider you're talking to an art director here. Right. Or an illustration agent who's going to hire you for specific things, usually with other art directors, agencies, clients, whatever, for a commercial purpose. This kind of work has little to no commercial value. Right. In a applied arts brief, I'm talking about like not fine arts, applied arts, in a graphic design brief, like you would never see a pencil drawing like this on a box of cereal or a can of Coke or whatever. It's just not going to happen. So an art director is going to look at this and think, that's cool, I appreciate this in the same way that I appreciate like the Mona Lisa in a museum as fine art. But none of them are going to sit there and just go like, hey, you know what? I really like the Mona Lisa. We should hire Da Vinci for this like music label that we're branding or whatever. Right. So I think, just consider what it is that you're saying. And one of the big things that I often tell my students is give me a context behind the illustration work that you're doing. Don't just show me an illustration as a standalone thing. Show me that there was a brief behind it. Show me that there was an idea behind it. Right, so some sort of purpose for the drawing or the illustration. Like the reason why it exists, which this is fun and like do it, and you know, like I do this for myself and like geek out on just getting super realistic on the clock. But from a commercial standpoint, this is not necessarily the work that I want to be asked to do, and this is not the kind of work that will get me more work. So you just need to consider that. I would even go as far as saying, like, if you've done this drawing like this just for fun, then like make up a brief that this could be for. Right. So we talk about it sometimes like the retrofit brief. Yeah. So it's like, hey, I really like this kind of thing that I've done, so maybe I'll kind of go back and create this environment where it makes sense. Totally. And then maybe expand on it as well, which I think is really good for students and graduates and people getting into the industry to do. Yeah. I'm completely all about that kind of stuff where it's like, do the illustration work and then show me what I could use this on. Yeah. Like, I'm going to use you for some work. Like, show me where that can happen. And I think it's down to even I'll show you some examples of that on my website. It's down even to this idea of like, if you want to, we've been through this before, this one a few times, but
I like to think that people just tuned in for the first time and never seen your work before, and they're looking at this and going, "Oh yeah, it's actually pretty good."
So this is a kind of a reverse brief that I did for Xbox.
Xbox, right? Yep.
So I had some collaborations going with them. They lent me the Surface Studio, the big 28-inch one, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, all right, I'll do an illustration on that they could maybe use.
Right.
So like, do an illustration, but make yourself a brief for it. But try and think of a brief that maybe Microsoft could use on something like Xbox.
Yeah.
And so I came up with this idea of using their logo and then kind of going into some of their exclusive titles like, Halo or Gears of War or whatever. And then made this kind of illustration for it. And then what do you know? They ended up using it.
Right.
So that's a good example of like, don't just show me an illustration of like Master Chief, who's like the main character for Halo on its own, because that's only going to go so far. Like, show me how we could use you on a thing.
Yep, totally.
If you want to do skateboard illustration, then do an illustration and, slap it on a board. And then send it off to like, Palo Peralta or Nike SB or whatever.
Yeah, so you're kind of packaging it all up going, hey, I get this. Like, I understand what you need as well. Yeah. So it's not just, hey, here's this one thing that by itself, hey, hire me for something. They might be like, they're busy, they're tired, they've got a specific campaign that's going. But you feel like, hey, this is ready to go. Like, look at it. It's basically perfect. They might think, you know what, not right now, but actually there's a campaign happening next month. Maybe you could do something similar for us, or maybe we could take this and use it directly.
Yep.
All that sort of stuff.
And I think it very much comes down to this thing of like, do the work you want to be asked to do.
Right.
And if that's the kind of stuff that you want to do, then gear your work towards that. Obviously, your work will lend itself better to certain things than others. Like, as you guys can see, like my work would lend itself well to the kind of briefs that I get, which is, Japanese-related briefs, manga. I just finished working on some manga pages for a pub in Surrey Hills where they've just kind of printed for main. It's a Japanese pub.
Which one is that?
Like, that one. So for Goros. So again, like, I'm doing Japanese work, so a Japanese pub approaches me and says, do some work with us. Yeah. Not just kind of like, hey, you do drawing. We need a drawing done. That's the wrong kind of brief, I guess. And you will get those, I think, when you're starting out your career for sure. But after a point, I think you need to think about how that goes away and you do the work you want to be asked to do.
Yeah, because you were a commercial illustrator with like quite a broad, because we've known each other for quite a long time now. It's getting ridiculous how long I've known you actually. And your portfolio looked very different even a couple of years ago.
Yes, yeah. So all the work that you guys see here is basically like a couple of years' work. And
you've done a lot of work in the last couple of years, by the way.
Yeah, but I think that's because there's focus to it.
Right.
This is my old website. Right, this is what my website body of work used to look like. So immediately you guys can see it's like chalk and cheese.
Yes, this is a different illustrator's website.
Absolutely. In fact,
from the outside
sometimes I think this is like 3 different illustrators' websites.
Right.
Because it's like, do you do the watercolor? Do you do the vector work? Who are you?
Right.
And so I was doing this kind of stuff, and I thought that I was kind of showing like, hey, I can do this, I can do this, I can do all these kind of different things, so make sure you hire me because I can do whatever you want me to do.
Right.
Which I think is the main mistake that I see a lot of students doing is, I think especially for illustration, but maybe a bit less so, I don't know, for graphic design, branding, advertising, all that, but definitely illustration, I think trying to be the jack of all trades.
Right.
I don't think is really a good sort of strategy. It's not horrible and you will still have a career for sure. But I think trying to focus on one style, one sort of type of content, that's a much better approach. And that sends out a much clearer message to people where somebody looking at this, it goes like, okay, who are you? We don't know who you are. We don't know where we could use you. And yes, I've got some watercolor, and yes, I've got some concept art, and yes, I've got some illustrated type. But the truth is, like, if you want the choicest cut of meat, you will go to the butcher who only does meat.
Right.
You won't go to a supermarket that has all of the things a little bit.
It reminds me, I just recently moved and discovering all the cafes and everything around, and there's one that's like really cheap, and its breakfast menu is like 8 pages.
Yeah.
And they do everything.
Yeah.
But guess what? They do everything pretty badly. It's fast and it's cheap. Whereas there's like a couple little boutique ones, and we go, oh cool, we go over there for our coffee, and we go over here for this thing. I sound like such a ritzy little joke here,
but I think
but it's interesting. Yeah, when you try to appeal to everything, it does water it down.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you will probably end up missing out on the interesting briefs as well. When the big interesting briefs with the client that have a little bit more room for like budget and time, they will go to the specialists. Yeah. Which unfortunately is not going to be you, because you're kind of doing all the things. And even what you were saying with that cafe, right? It's like they're doing everything kind of a little bit badly. Like that's not a surprise, because they're chasing 17 different things at the same time. Yeah. But I think it's possible to do 17 things really, really well. The tragedy is that that's not what people are going to think. The assumption, if you look at that menu and they've got like burritos, sushis, burgers, crepes, it's like, how well do you do all of those things? Yeah. And you know what? I'm not even going to wait to find out. Probably badly. Yeah. So that even if you are awesome at all those things, you're probably not giving yourself the best chances. Exactly. Which is a little bit sad. So this was me kind of for like 10, 11 years and getting some work, but getting a huge range of different work. This was me being like somebody who can draw. We need somebody who can draw. You do us a drawing. One day it's like a cow. The next day it's a bottle. The next day it's some grapes. It's like.
And were you finding you were doing more work then that you didn't particularly like and enjoy?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also I think the brief was a lot less clear.
Right.
Because when a brief comes to you, like nowadays when a brief comes to me, it's like, if you've come to me, I already know that you want one of three things. Okay. You want either Japanese or cyberpunk or neon 80s kind of vibe. Those are the three things.
It's if you came
to me, if you came to me for something else, then that's on you. Yeah. Right? And I will probably turn down that brief. If you came to me saying like, we want a cow illustrated for a children's book, like I'm probably not the best person for that, and I will forward you on to somebody who is the best person for that. But I think this is the thing. Like now, the briefs are a lot clearer for me. Yeah. And the body of work is bigger, even though it's a shorter span of time, because when I sit down, it's not like, who am I today? What am I going to do? Is it watercolor? Is it vector? Is it type? It's like, it's going to be one of these things. So it gives me a lot more kind of drive and focus. But yeah, I think for you guys out there sort of building a portfolio, consider absolutely the message that you're sending out to people. You think it's this, and it might not be exactly that, which is the point of showing you guys my original portfolio. Was I thought I was saying this thing. That's not what everybody else was hearing. Right. Which can be really frustrating.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So one of the questions that came up time and time again was about tools, about using things. We've covered it a couple of times, but I think it'd be useful to talk about it, because you're probably one of the only people I know that have used like everything under the sun. Trackpad, mouse, every tablet, I think, that's out there. So you're probably the best person to answer this question. Was basically, when do you recommend getting a tablet? So, and the context of that is someone getting into illustration. At what stage? Is it the first thing you need to do? Or is it once you start, getting paid commissions? Like, where on the timeline do you invest in a tablet?
Yeah.
Of some kind.
I think, look, in a perfect world, straight away.
Right.
In a world where money exists and students also don't have a lot of it, that's probably not necessarily going to be a practical reality. Yeah. Where, you're probably going to want to have some work coming under your belt, and then you get a Wacom or a drawing tablet.
Yeah. Food, shelter, entertainment, tablet, right.
But I think the reality is like, the sooner you can get it, the better. If you're absolutely 100% set on becoming a freelance illustrator, you are going to need one. Yeah. Hands down. Absolutely. I know a few illustrators who work with a mouse exclusively, and they produce amazing work. So it is possible, but it's that idea of doing work with a mouse. It's kind of like the artwork becomes the process. Yeah, a little bit. It's like, this artwork is this because it's done with a mouse. If it was done with a Wacom, it would be seen a little bit differently. Right. But yeah, I would say as soon as you can. The funny kind of story is my first Wacom, which was like years and years and years ago. my mum bought for me because I was a student and I couldn't afford one, and she was like, let's be supportive, and he wants to do graphic design and illustration, so let's do that. I originally thought like this is not like, I'm not at that level where this is kind of like spoiled on me a little bit.
Right.
Like I don't think that I'll be able to use this at its full potential. And then I started using it, and it's just kind of, it became absolutely inherent to my work. I think it's a little bit like this thing of like, do I need a car? I never use one. It's like, yeah, but that's because you don't have one.
Right.
If you had one, you would use it all the time.
Right.
So I think that thing of like, I don't know that I need one because I can do my work without it. I don't know if I can justify it. It's like, it justifies itself, I think. And you do one job and it's kind of paid for itself.
Right. Okay, cool, interesting. Another one that came up all the time, and this, I know this question is how long is a piece of string, but is how many pieces of work would I need in a portfolio? And you can probably answer this from a graphic design perspective as well. How many pieces of work do I need in a folio or on my website or on my Instagram? Like, how much work do I need to put out there to show people this is what I like to do, this is the type of illustrator I am?
Again, I think in the context of like getting a job, which is what we're talking about, build a portfolio, get an interview, land a job.
Yep.
I would say definitely quality over quantity, for sure. Some people throw out in random numbers of like, anywhere in between sort of like 7 and 15. It's like,
it's a pet hate of mine. I love it when you see the question, someone's like 20.
Yeah.
Like 20 what?
Exactly, like 20 pages.
20 pages, 20
projects. Like it's like, and even then, like every project is not built equal, right? So
totally.
Like, if you got 20 logos or you just did the logo and it's like, that's not really a project. Does it count? So I think definitely quality over quantity, but again, not to kind of like drill this one sort of in too much, but something like this is interesting because what we've got here is one illustration that's been used over like 7 or 8 different applications.
Right.
So we're sort of traditionally being like really a little bit blunt here, but you put this in your portfolio and that's one page. Maybe what you can do is like show me the sketches behind it. So the process is crazy important when it comes to this kind of stuff because it shows me how you got there. It's not just like, ta-da, here's the end result. It's like, yeah but maybe you fluked it.
Right.
Like, I want to see how you got there.
Yeah.
Like, to that
Did you trace that as well, or is it derivative of something else? Like, all that sort of stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like, what was the idea? What was the brief? Like, that's where that's revealed, right? Process is, I think in a lot of ways is maybe even more important than the final piece.
Right.
Because it's a little bit like, consider MasterChef, right? If MasterChef, the show was like a bunch of people bringing out dishes that they made like behind the cameras, it's like, that show would be boring. Yeah. The whole point of the show is the process behind the cook.
Yep.
And particularly because if you're watching the show on telly, you can't taste the dish. What's the point of the final piece? So then we come back to this kind of stuff, and like, because it's digital portfolio, I do an animated GIF of the steps, and the clients love this kind of stuff because they get a little bit of an inkling of like, how did this come to life? Like, you didn't just pull this out of a hat. You made this with your hands. And then showing them different variants and different applications. So like, hint, hint, this is how cool this could look if you used it on giant billboards around the world. Right. Do it. Yeah. And then, like put it on more billboards, then show them like close-ups of the work. Like, look how cool this is, right? Like, take your work and show me the work that you did. Don't just put it in there in the middle, like hero it, present it in a way that's going to be interesting, and then do little kind of choice cuts of like, look at this and look at the detail of the visor on Master Chief's helmet and all this kind of stuff, right? Things that you might miss if it's printed small in an A3 or A4 portfolio like that. Yep. You might not see those things. So make sure that I see those things. And then, show me applications of like, again, hint, hint, like, wouldn't this be cool if you used it for the main packaging for the Xbox One X? Like, they didn't, but I tried. And then I think I had, I didn't put it in here. That's weird. I put it on a controller as well, just to mark it up there. Again, one piece of illustration becomes like 7 or 8 pages.
It's actually a piece.
It becomes a project, right? Which you can talk about and kind of give us an idea of what the brief was, what the idea was. That's interesting. right? Not just like little bits of drawings. It's like, here's a drawing, here's another one that live alone in kind of isolation.
Yeah.
Show me a project, show me how you went from A to B to C, and then that becomes like maybe you've got 4 projects and 20 pages in your portfolio. That makes more sense in my brain than like, here's 25 jobs that I've done. Like,
yeah. Yeah, it gets a bit samey as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then you're going through the thing and it's like, here's a thing that I did, here's another thing that I did, here's another thing that I did, rather than like talking about an entire project and what the story was behind it, what you were trying to do, what you achieved or not. I think that's really where, in my brain, sort of talking about a portfolio lives. Yeah,
cool. And while we're talking about portfolios, something else that came up sort of time and time again is just the role of Instagram at the moment with illustration, and it's quite interesting because like we've seen the rise of it, you know, as a replacement for portfolios, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think the sentiment of a lot of the questions was around how much stock do I put into something like Instagram versus portfolio versus other platforms like Behance or, you know, a different website or a different platform.
So I think like I've got Instagram.
Yep.
I think in order of like kind of keeping stuff up to date, it would go Instagram, my website, Behance.
The gram is where it's at.
Yeah. So I think for illustrators and photographers, it's an image-driven media that's completely active. So a website is really passive.
Right.
You have to go to the URL. It just sits there waiting for somebody to visit it. If you don't, you can't stumble upon my website, or you can, but it's like you need to be in Google doing a search for a thing. You need to already be doing a lot of the work to find my website.
Yeah. It's asking a lot from people to go to your URL.
Yeah, whereas Instagram is just kind of like,
everyone's there anyway.
if you're just, you can be doing your morning scroll and my work happens to come under your eyes without you having to do anything.
Yeah.
Or without me having to do anything. So I think in that sense, for like image-driven content, probably less so like for things like Twitter, for instance, and Facebook, because that's a kind of a different beast, but Twitter is words, Instagram is images, I think. So yeah, Instagram is really, really important. I get nowadays, probably in the last sort of 2 years since I've really gone full into Instagram, I get the bulk of my work through Instagram.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, not so much kind of through contact pages through my website, which still can happen. Behance is really good in the sense that it's like, again, I've got a Behance profile, like I try and keep it updated as much as I can, but Behance is great because it's more of a kind of like a network internationally. Yeah. Which is kind of similar to Instagram, but Behance kind of orders and categorizes that in a slightly different way, which it has definitely certain advantages that websites and Instagram don't have.
Definitely in the US, it's like Behance is huge.
Yeah, huge. But yeah, I think definitely like if you are super keen on getting your work out there and creating a sense of consistency and style as well, which is another sort of big element, Instagram's going to be a big help for you. And getting your work in front of people who may otherwise not see it because they're not looking for it.
Yeah, they're not Googling Jeremy Lloyd Illustrator.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a kind of a simpler way of putting it. Is like Instagram you can find without looking, whereas a website you need to be looking for a thing.
Like that. It's like a neat little lock up there. Yeah. Did we talk about style? Did we go into style and branding?
Not really. No, I think we kind of touched upon it a little bit, like looking at sort of the older work and sort of what's the message that you're putting out there. But
so I guess maybe we'll answer this question. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but like, how do you find your style?
At the risk of sounding a little bit trite, you don't.
You don't.
It finds you, kind of. I think the really dangerous thing, and like that's not an absolute statement, I guess I should say, but my students often ask me that, like, where do I find a style? It's like, that's not the right thing to do, because if you go looking for a style, you're going to find someone else's. You're going to find one that's ready-made, that exists already, and then you're just going to be kind of copying that person's work a little bit. Yep. I think, like for me, again, like I can only kind of talk about that, but I'll show you guys a couple of artists that had a bit of an impact on me in different ways. So the first one is Andrew Archer, who's a super talented illustrator who lives in Melbourne. Immediately you guys can see like he does a fair bit of sort of Japanese themes, but he does them in a very, Japanese engraving kind of way. Yeah. It feels a little bit like ukiyo-e, kind of hokusai kind of vibe to it.
Quite traditional almost.
Yeah. It's very digital. Really full of color. Really love the theme. So it's not necessarily like the Japanese theme is not something that he would own or that I would own. It's just like that's a thing that a lot of people kind of do.
Yeah.
But there was a thing there that kind of clicked with me of like, okay, cool. Maybe I can explore that a little bit in my own way. And the second one is James Durrett, who's also an illustrator living in Sydney. Super talented. Immediately, you guys can probably see like there's a pretty sort of strong kind of color theme that happens in his work. That's the same with mine. His work kind of showed me a little bit like, all right, cool. Maybe I can just do what I want to do and see where that goes. I really like the colors that he uses, so I kind of thought like, all right, that could be a good starting place to go on. Having chats with him as well, talking about where he gets his ideas from and all that was super interesting. But the gist of all that is like I take those two things and think, all right, what's my background? What's my childhood? What are my influences? Those, like I grew up with manga. Yeah. Because I grew up in France. France and Japan had a huge cultural exchange in sort of 80s, 90s. So I grew up with a lot of the mangas that everybody knows, like Dragon Ball and all that kind of stuff. But then I also had like Ranma and a half, all this kind of stuff. So that really influenced me. Skate culture really influenced me. And I'm an 80s child. And so those things are the things that I was like, all right, let's take this ingredient, that ingredient, that ingredient, throw them in a blender and see.
Just a nostalgia blender.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like my work is kind of summed up a little bit like if you can imagine like Shogun Assassin, but shot by like Denis Villeneuve in a like Blade Runner universe. Yeah. That's where my work lies. Like, right? Like it's a samurai with a lightsaber.
Right. Yeah. Samurai with a lightsaber. It's a good way, I think, to wind it out. Is there any kind of parting advice that you might give to any like illustrators out there or people who want to get into the field?
I think, I would say, and again, this sounds really corny and cliched, but this is something that you do as a passion. Yeah. I think more than a lot of different careers, like if you're a web designer, you don't go home after work doing web design and just design websites for fun. Yeah. True. If you're an illustrator, you do that. Once you're finished on your work, you do your own stuff for shits and giggles, right? So I think, do what you like to do. Do the work you want to be asked to do projects that you find fun to do. And I think do a lot of work as well, for sure. Yes. It's a really sort of demanding thing to get good at, to try out a bunch of different things. So I think, spend a lot of time on it, but make sure that time is time that you're kind of having fun on.
Yeah, nice. Okay, that's good advice. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Maybe we can recap the where people can go on YouTube to the Creative Challenge. So there's 3 parts to the Creative Challenge. We can leave the template up there, I think, for people, so you can always download that template while it's there.
So the template is this file that you guys are seeing right now. It's just like a JPEG that's up there.
So download that, give it a go. We're no longer accepting submissions to review, so we'll remove that. But I don't know, you could share it on Instagram or something like that and tag us in and we'll check it out. And just go through the steps 1, 2, and 3. And also, you don't have to use that illustration if you want to do your own. Check that out. You can follow the exact same steps to figure out how to basically go from a notebook, scanning it in and bring it into kind of finished artwork, line work, and color, which is cool. We'll stay tuned. In about 20 minutes, we've got some more illustration content coming to you. And so stick around, and 2 p.m. Australian time, that's all happening. So we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Cheers, Ben, and thanks guys for tuning in.
See you guys.